Hi, my name is Wendy Leggett, and I'm a retirement life coach, and I'm so excited to share a soulful conversation
Hello,
today.
sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Once you leave the clouds.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl Sharonda with Women's Successful Living, and welcome to our new name show, Soulful Self-Care Conversations. And we are all about having conversations around every aspect of our life that we can pour into our soul so that we can take care of ourselves, so we can live that life where our cup is overflowing and that you can become a hero of your life. So you can become stronger, you can become happier, empowered, radiant, and that original self you're meant to be in all areas of your self-care. And today is no different. Today we have a very special guest with us, Wendy Leggett. She's a professional certified coach and the owner of Conflux Retirement Coaching, specializes in non-financial life planning with advanced credentials in career to retirement transitions and 25 years of corporate sales leadership experience. She guides clients into purposeful life chapters, focusing on identity, well-being, and positive aging. And who doesn't need that? Because you guys, I just turned 60 last October and I don't feel it. And everybody says, you don't look it and sound it. So I'll take those every day, all day long. So Wendy, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. I love the energy of your show, and it's fun to get to talk with you.
Yay. I'm so excited for this conversation because, sometimes retirement can be scary and, we're all over the place. And, I like how in your bio about the non-financial retirement, and things like that and how to enjoy that retirement. But if you're new to the show, we're going to do something that we typically like to start our show off with every week. And if you're a frequent subscriber, and if you haven't, subscribe below. I'll spit all that out together. But just join us in this way we love to start our show, Wendy, is I like to talk to little Wendy. I like to go back and talk to little girl Wendy and ask her what did she want to do when she grew up? Like, how was life? Did she envision it? When she grew up to be this adult that we have to become someday in our lives, what did she want to do? And how does it compare to what you're doing today? So like for me, I often share on the show how I grew up and wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. I wanted to, empower young minds to have the broad aspect of whatever could come in the world. I didn't have the opportunity to go to school and to do that, but here I am, I'm coaching, and I joke with my friends and sometimes my clients, I say, I probably would have taught you in elementary school. So here, I just have you in your adult life. I'm helping you, recreate that childhood for yourself and step into who you're originally supposed to be. And so, Wendy, if we can talk to little Wendy for a few minutes, will you let us know what was life like for her growing up and what did she want to be when she grew up to this beautiful adult you are today? And how does it compare to what you're doing today?
Mm. I listened to your show a lot, so I knew that you'd ask this question. So I had to dig a little deep on it because being honest about it, when the question first came up, it was like, wow, I feel like I was really in the present at that time. Really wasn't projecting ahead. I wasn't really looking at who I could become. I think I was just really enjoying being on the playground. I tended to be in charge of whatever was going on. I had loads of friends. I had a lot of anxious feelings about not doing everything perfectly. That's what I remember. But then I started digging a little deeper and thought, well, and I don't know at what age I wanted to be a librarian. And I think the reason for that was because I had this love of books. I mean, I got together with friends and did a lot of activities, but I also just loved sitting on my bed in my room reading. And this will sound very nerdy, but I also would always have a dictionary next to me. And if there was a word that I didn't know, then I would look it up. And even now I sometimes use words that are probably so unnecessary or beyond me, but I just had this love of words. So librarian, I think that's what I recall at my earliest state. So then if we flash forward and say, well, how does that relate to what I'm doing? I mean, I think harkening back to that presence, I mean, that's what it's for me. It's all about is being in the moment and really soaking in what we have in this moment because we're not promised one beyond. And then the piece about the education piece with librarians, and librarians always help people find the answers, or they know the resources. So they might not write your paper for you, but they might give you a pathway to it. So I think that's how it ties in.
Wow, that's so cool. I love that the correlation and how you walked in. And thank you for saying how you listen to our show. It's always nice to hear my guests go, I listen to your show often. So thank you so much for being part of our audience as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I like what you said that by being present. And I'm gonna go back to that in a second, but I like also how you correlated like the librarian piece to helping find the answers. Because you're right, we would go to our librarian for answers. Where's this book? Where's that book? How do I find out the dictionary? All those things.
Yeah.
And I do see that, and we're gonna talk about that, how that correlates for what you're doing today. But I do want to talk about being in the presence. We talk about self-care here a lot on our show, and
Beautiful.
being present is a huge part of self-care. And for those that are new to the show, you may not have heard my journey before. And those that have been a part of our audience, you're going to be familiar with this. And I appreciate your being part of my journey. And that is that, I have two amazing, beautiful boys. I have an amazing husband of almost 40 years. But one of my beautiful boys, Matt, passed when he was 25 years old, 2.5 years ago in a tragic car accident. And one of the things that came out of that, like, I was so happy that my boys saw me start working on overcoming people pleasing. I always was putting everybody else first, including them, and I put myself last. And 2 days before Matthew passed, he was here visiting my husband. They were working on some stuff for their business they own together. And he's like, Mom, can you throw me a water bottle? And I chucked the water bottle across to him. And he said to me, man, you know, I figured out who the heck you are, but now you can throw something, because I could never throw a football to him at football practice. And so 2 days later, after he said that, he passed. And
Mm.
fast forward through all of that, about 2 weeks after he passed, we had not one, but two of his friends. And over the 6 months after that, many friends, because I had his phone, which I still do, would reach out to him on his phone thinking that he was still here. And two people actually came to our doorstep to have that conversation and to look at these young men and be like, he's not here anymore. It really cemented for me about living in the presence, like being
Mm.
part of the presence, because we don't know what tomorrow's going to be. We don't know what it's going to bring. And so I'm glad you said that when up front, like living in the presence and knowing and enjoying that presence that you have right now. And part of that does go to what you do, because we, you know, we have this big picture that all growing up, you've got to work, you got to work these 9 to 5 jobs. You have to, and then you work for retirement, right? I think now we're in an age where, since COVID, especially, we have so many more entrepreneurs that are out here. There's so many more people starting their own business or having what they call the side hustle, if you want to call it, but having more than just that one 9 to 5 income. I have many friends that have their 9 to 5 income because of the insurance factors and things like that, but they're doing on the side the things they love to do, the things that bring them joy. And so when you talk about, I know we talked about, about living the non-financial retirement life planning. Talk to us about, what is that? Like, what does that look like? And what does that mean? So the person who's listening that maybe doesn't know, help them understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it isn't something that's kind of in our vocabulary. We know that when we're going to retire, that we need to have our financial house in order, or if we don't, we're going to have concerns about it, or anxiety about it, or anxious thoughts about it. But we don't think about that we bring our whole selves into retirement, just like we bring our whole selves into every aspect of our lives, and especially in milestone moments. And so, for example, when we think about moving from high school to college, we think about, if somebody chooses to go to college, we think about not just being able to pay for it, but what's our course of study? What are we aspiring to do? What does the campus life look like for us that we would prefer? Or if we're going to move from, say, not being married to being married, yes, we think about paying for the wedding, but we think hopefully way, way more than that. So in every aspect of our lives, there is that financial component in most of them as we make these changes, but there's the whole non financial piece as well. And so I even share with people, when you think about going on a vacation, you think about what you can afford, but you also think about what you want to do when you get there. What memories do you want to build? What do you want to see, taste, and feel? The same goes with retirement. So why don't we put a spotlight on that as well? And yet we don't. I think that people, it's kind of baked into retirement that now it's freedom and stress free and endless weekends, leisure and travel. And yet life doesn't work that way. We do have these ups and downs. And just like you mentioned with the pandemic, that was a pivot point for people. And some just saw the pitfalls, others found those possibilities. That's what I equip people for as they move from career into retirement. Otherwise, we can feel as though we've lost pieces of ourselves. We can feel like we've lost a sense of purpose. We can start to feel our age weigh heavy on us. We can lose connection with people. So I'm kind of giving it to you in a nutshell, but that's what the non-financial piece is about, is that whole exploration and saying, who am I now? What do I see for myself? What's that vision? And how do I get into action to make it happen?
Yeah, and it's so true because we do. I mean, that's one of the areas, like, I have clients that will come to me, like, as they're starting to approach retirement, they're like, I worked so much for this company that I don't know my identity anymore. And even like back for me, like when I was going on this journey to overcome people pleasing, I remember, I was doing just health and wellness coaching, and I was having clients go, "Will you talk to my friend, because you don't talk about what I am eating or not eating. You're talking about what is the emotion behind my choice." So my friend doesn't need to lose weight, but there's choices they're making in their life that they don't understand, and they don't know how the emotion plays into it. So by me doing that, I was like this, okay, God, you're telling me I need to do more than health and wellness coaching. I really need to expand my life coaching. And I
Mm,
decided to take this identity and destiny course. And in that, at the end of 6 weeks, we had to give that I am statement. And I was still saying I was all my titles that I was wearing instead of like who was Pearl.
mm,
And I started going, wow, I need to figure this out. And that's how I went on this journey to overcoming people pleasing, knowing that the word no is a complete sentence, just like yes is. And I can say it with $1 million smile on my face. And so I was able to early on, like, not have to work to retirement and find this, my identity. But sometimes that's what happens. Like we see
mm.
many people, and I know in your coaching world, you see that too, where like people work and there's like, oh, I'm going to retire now. Now I don't have to get up 9 to 5 and go to work. And I watch it with my husband. My husband worked for the Department of VA for all his career, practically in the government world. And here he goes, he was approaching retirement, and him and my son Matthew started a business, and now he's running it. I look and think, had he not had that, like when he started the business, he started for Matthew for some things that Matt was going through at the time, thinking, oh, maybe this will give him, a passion or give him purpose. And
Yes.
so now, while I look back and, I have to tell him this because as I'm saying, I'm coaching myself as I'm talking to you. As I look back now, that choice has given him purpose and reason to
What a
carry
gift.
on. Yeah,
Mm,
it's that gift that he was able to give himself through helping Matthew,
yeah.
because I don't know that what he would be doing. He probably would find something to do, but every day it gets him up every morning. He spends time doing that. And the rest of the day, he does what he wants to do. And so I have clients that come to me and go, I don't want to sit in my front porch and sit in a swing all the time because I don't have anything to do. Like I've
Yes.
I've worked in this, career. I worked as this nurse. I worked as this, mom, and now my kids are out of the house, and what am I going to do now? Like that's
Yeah.
what you said about
No,
identity.
there's so much there that you're sharing, and it really is this being versus doing. You're mentioning the emotional pieces of it. And so often, especially in the demographic that's looking more closely at retiring soon, is that emotions weren't really given much attention. If emotions came up, then we knew to push them aside or push them down, power through, no pain, no gain. But emotions aren't good or bad, they're just a signal. And if we key into those emotions, which is that being, allowing ourselves to not just jump into an activity or a doing, but really key in, oh, okay, I'm going to be retiring in 2 years, but I feel really unsettled about it. I feel confused. One client said, I feel lost in the desert. Another said, I feel like I'm going to probably fail at retirement. That's a signal that, okay, something needs your attention. It's not a showstopper, though, if we don't allow it to be one. And so recognizing that all of these difficult emotions, challenging ones, are going to come up, but that doesn't mean that you miss the day that everybody else went to learn the key to retiring happily and stress free. It just means that you're going to give yourself some space and grace to think about it. So we don't want to overly think about it, but we do want to recognize that, again, beyond the financials, we're bringing our whole selves in. And you shared that, people are busy with their work. Our lives can get out of balance, and we know that. So now retirement is this beautiful time to really be able to see, what are the piece parts in my life that have gotten short shrift? Or what are the things that I really want to make more of a priority and try to integrate all of those things into our life. So I do go through, and you probably do with your clients too, that wheel of life and really looking at where we're spending some of our time. But that's been a breakthrough for a number of my clients. One who is going to go from full-time job to full-time volunteering. And when we went through that exercise, she saw that, my husband has already been saying that you're not spending time with me, and I want us to spend time. She had that commitment going into retirement, but now she's going to go full time into volunteering. So looking at that wheel and seeing, I want to make time for my relationships. I want to make time for some of my activities, for my health. So that's an important piece. But I really want to underscore this concept around identity, because our lives are so integrated with our work oftentimes that when we leave our work, we can feel like we're leaving pieces of ourselves behind. There's a saying, if you are what you do, who are you when you don't? And that becomes a big question. And it becomes one that can loom large for people if they don't start to explore and have you know, start to have those answers. But I think so often that people think it's a do it yourself project. I'm going to go into retirement. I'm going to check off my to-do list, my bucket list, and it's going to be, coming up roses. So there's that idealistic view. Or on the other end of the spectrum, there can be that pessimistic view. I'm getting older. There's more loss in my life. Um, I'm looking at aging a lot more closely, one foot into the grave. And so what I really want to share is let's bring it to the middle and have this realistic optimism. Really understand what's up ahead, that we want to map out our retirement, just like we have all these other stages in our lives, and then step into it. But experiment and try things out. So there's a lot there that I've shared. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here thinking, so what if we change the narrative? What if
Mhm.
we said you can, because I'm thinking, okay, those that are listening right now, they're going, I have 30 more years till I retire. Like, okay, you don't have to wait till then. You can start like creating boundaries. You can start doing the things you love. You can start doing volunteering, but you can also make sure that you have those checks and balances about, am I spending too much time here? Am I not doing, showing up for my relationships at this point where I want to? Because I remember like when you were talking, I was like going, I remember that 40-year-old Pearl who was in mortgages, and I worked so many hours doing mortgages. I was at the beck and call for realtors, and I loved all my realtors back then, of course. However, when I look back, I'm like, man, I let them control my hours instead of me controlling my hours. And so if you're listening to us and you're in that demographic of going, I've got a long time, there's no reason why you can't start now going, okay, if I'm going to plan for my retirement, not only am I planning my financial piece, but how am I planning my peace? How am I
Yeah.
planning my
Mhm.
mindfulness,
Yeah.
and you can start that now by having boundaries. And if you're in a leadership world, I love when I work with my professional women that have high demanding careers, and they like, when they think about delegating, I love to challenge the ones. And if you're listening, you're one of those people that say, well, so and so won't do it as good as me, so I have to do it. I'm going
Mhm.
to call you boo hunky because, and
Not boo monkey.
yeah, because the thing is, you may learn something from somebody you delegate that to. So if you think you have the control of something because you think it's not going to come out the way you want it to, I'm going to challenge you to give it to somebody and empower, delegate. Because if you don't delegate, let me just tell you this way. If for some reason you're not here tomorrow, I guarantee you, they'll put somebody into your seat that will slide right into your seat, take over your position. I promise you, your family will learn how to cook, clean, and take care of themselves. Not the way you did it, but based on how you showed them you did it. I promise you they will be able to do all that. So right now, if you're listening to us and you're overwhelmed, you're stressed out, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, Pearl and Wendy, what you're talking about is great. And either you are close to retirement or you're thinking about how 10, 20 years down the line that might look for you. I promise you, if you start doing some of the things we're talking about today, when retirement comes up, you're going to be able to not only hopefully have your finances in order, but you can have your mental wellness in order.
Yeah.
You can have your balance in order. Like what you said about the client with the volunteering, it's great to volunteer, but the spouse at home is saying, I want some of that time too. So
Yeah.
that means that person's got to be like, I can volunteer for you here, but I can't always be there for that. Right. So
Yeah.
creating boundaries. And I will tell you, I did not learn about boundaries and overcoming that until my oldest was a junior in high school, which is really, really sad when I think about all those years I lost of doing things. And I tell everybody, including myself, life's not a remote. I can't rewind, but I can change how I move forward. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And
so
I think the same when people are getting prepared for retirement is instead of looking at that rearview mirror, yes, it can inform us, like you were mentioning, that informed you that boundaries would help me to move forward in a more empowered way. So then, but we use it then in a way that is empowering. And I love how you're mentioning that really at any age or life stage, we can start to develop this runway to retirement because it's really not retirement per se, it's just to our best self. It's to what we can become, what we envision for ourselves. But if we don't have that vision, then it's just like getting in the car and not having GPS and knowing where you're going, not having a destination. You're going to be driving all around aimlessly, you're going to be wasting gas. You're going to get frustrated. You're not going to be moving in a direction. So, yes, the majority of us at some point in time are going to retire. So let's have that in the background to recognize that we want to develop this, what I call a runway to retirement, and take those smallest steps because oftentimes people don't have that vision. They haven't put some of those things in practice. They say, oh, when I retire, I'll get healthy. Oh, when I retire, then I'll find a significant other. And so one day they're in, the next day they're out. They haven't built some of those habits and patterns that are supportive, that allow them to experiment, to allow them to try things and not get derailed, to allow them to pivot. And so it is about mindset and it is about intentionality. I talk about taking aim, being aware that 1 in 3 struggle in retirement, being aware that if you don't dictate your life, life will dictate it for you. That you have this opportunity to be the CEO of you, the leader of your life. And so that awareness and then that intention and saying, what is important to me? What is my why? What feels meaningful and purposeful to me? And then getting into action, getting moving. So taking aim, awareness, intention, and movement.
I love what you said about CEO of your life and that how we can dictate our life. It doesn't have to dictate it for us. We can, like you
Yep.
said, create that roadmap, get the runway ready, and as you're talking, and as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about, I think it's one thing that companies and our schools missed during COVID was the mental fitness, the mindfulness of things that was happening. I think I look back at, and I could be wrong. So if you're listening to us, you disagree with me, it's your opinion. And I look at the age that we're seeing some of these young kids with these mass shootings, or not even maybe even having the gun, but they're talking about wanting to shoot their school or whatever. When I look at the age of them, I'm like, if you go back to how many years, some of them are 10, 11 years old. If you go back 5 years, we're in the middle of COVID. We were shut down. They had no social interaction. We had nothing that we were teaching at our young kids during COVID of how to manage this, confinement kind of thing and just being with your family. And then on top of that, with companies, like we didn't talk about that with our employees that are at home, like that whole mindfulness. And I think that's a piece, like, especially as I expand on my coaching and now I'm starting to get my training in grief coaching. I'm starting to see that that's such a piece. So if you're an HR person and you're listening to us right now, take a note. I really feel that we need to do a better job in our companies, and whether you're a solopreneur, it applies to you as well. And then whether you're small business, large business, we need to be aware of our mindfulness. We need to be aware of how we're taking care of our brain, and it's our best friend and our worst enemy at the same time, as I love to coach about. And one of the things I remember sitting with, and I can't remember who it is, so if she's listening, I want to give you credit, but I can't, it's your name's escaped me, but we talked about how when the employee goes back to work after grief, especially after losing a child, right? I was very blessed. My husband was blessed that he's retired, but I was blessed that I worked from home. So I didn't have to go into an office when Matt passed. But I think about that mom or that dad who, I mean, we just come out of the DC crash. I think about all those parents that have to go back to, parenting again. When we have a younger son, we had to go in and have that conversation showing up in our life for him. How I think about you have to go to an office and you're like going, I remember talking with this person one time. She's like, Pearl, they wanted me to go in my back to work. It was like not even 2 weeks later, you're expected to go back to work because, you have so much FMLA or whatever. But you have to show up in like this work attire, whether it's a 3-piece suit or just business attire, right? She's like, I just want to go in my jeans and my t-shirt. Just let me show up for work for that. And I think that's the piece that we miss in our as business owners, as people who have employees. We miss about the mindfulness. We miss about how can we help our employees or help ourselves with understanding these things like retirement's going to come up. And yeah, you think, oh, I'm going to go travel and everything. Well, maybe you don't financially have that. So now you become disappointed because you didn't plan better to go travel and do these things, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's the part that we miss. And I know when I coach with my clients, one of the things, and you've heard me talk about in the show often, you guys, and if you're listening, pay attention. But what's your joy? I love working with my clients saying, what brings you joy? And I tell them it's going to take us a little while because I want 10 things. It's probably going to take you 10 weeks to identify every one of them. And then, like, what are you doing to work on that joy? And if it's just picking one thing to work on, that's going to lead you to being into that joy. It's going to change your mindfulness. It's going to change your outlook. It's going to help you, as you do prepare for some of these things that we're talking about retirement. It's going to help you identify, like your person who wants to volunteer. I love helping in this area. Where can I spend that time? Because that fills my heart. And so, Wendy, when you're working with your clients and, you're talking to them about being the CEO of their life, you're talking to them about you are what you do, and those kind of things. How do you help them start to step into identifying, what do I want to do? What's that look like for me for retirement? And then talk to us too about what are some of the tools you use to help them kind of get past that mind block of the looking back, like I said, life's not a remote, looking back at regrets and things. How do you help them like get through the next step?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. You're sharing about mindfulness, and I'm a big proponent of that as well. And that's around that intentionality too, is being in the present and really recognizing what's happening in the here and now, not holding on to what happened in the past or projecting so far into the future. Of course, I'm talking about retirement life planning, and so that is the future thinking, but it's recognizing who you are now, what skills, capabilities, passions you have now that you can bring with you into retirement. Because retirement isn't a new book in your life, it's a new chapter. You're bringing everything with you that you want to. You have an opportunity to also say, what do I want to let go of? So when you're talking about regrets, what do we want to let go of? It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means, does it serve us moving forward? So when I work with clients, first I start off with, how do you even define retirement? Because really, I'm a retirement life coach, but that word is so passe. It really doesn't belong in our vocabulary any longer. Here, I wanted to be a librarian, so we're talking about words. But, I believe that we will come up with a new word for it. But right now, it's a shared vocabulary. And we all know when somebody talks about retiring that they left their career. But for some, it's really determining, well, what does that mean and why now? I've had clients come to me that want to start working on preparing for their retirement, and it becomes very clear that their time horizon really is farther out than what they thought. But they started to feel like a lot of pressure from society or from friends or family. You're of a certain age, or come join us in the water. It's nice and warm, for retirement. And so oftentimes people again are abdicating. And I don't believe in abdicating to retire. I advocate that if you're going to retire, make that choice, do it intentionally and do it well. So we start off with, how do you define retirement? And then really looking at what feels meaningful to you, what feels purposeful. That word, you need to find purpose. is kind of a showstopper. It can become very overwhelming for people because, how do you find purpose? That can just seem so elusive. And so we kind of reframe it and say, instead of finding that one purpose, let's feel purposeful. And that can be reading a book. That can be helping a neighbor. That can be taking care of grandkids for the afternoon. That can be starting a small business with purpose with a capital P, as Richard Leiter says, or with a small p. But we don't have to have one and done. In fact, we can feel purposeful in so many ways. Purpose is baked into our work. And so it's not surprising that we can feel aimless about what is purpose post career. And then also tying the things that are of interest to us to our values, because we know that when we feel that something's important and meaningful and authentic and true to us, that we will stay more committed and more motivated. When it's external and it's somebody else's choices, then oftentimes we're not going to really be as committed to it. So that's why, as a coach, and I'm sure you walk this path too, we're not giving people the list of things to do. We're sharing with them the tools of how to discover that for themselves. So we do start off with identifying why retirement, what we envision for ourselves. And that can be difficult. So we go through some exercises. What's the perfect day in retirement for you? What's the perfect week? If I had a shorter time horizon, what would be the priorities? If time was no longer abundant and I didn't have any time left, what would I regret? So that we can reverse engineer. And that's a really great exercise that I'd love to offer to your listeners. And we can talk about that at the end, but the no regrets retirement. So we talk about those things. We talk, like we spoke about, the balance. We talk about connection, because we know that when we leave work, we're going to be leaving a lot of those connections behind. And I think people oftentimes think, oh, of course I'll stay in touch, but we don't have that shared, that common goal any longer, and that shared vocabulary. So we want to really deepen the friendships we have, look at the quality and quantity of those that we have, develop fresh friends. So I explore that with clients as well. One client had said to me, and this comes up on occasion too, is that, I was so busy with my work that I left a lot of those friendships on the sidelines, and I haven't been in touch, and now it's too late. And I really challenge, and I challenge your listeners too, is it too late? If you got a phone call from someone who hadn't been in touch with you for a while, would you say it's too late? No, you would welcome it, I would think, in the majority of cases. So the clients of mine that have brought that up and stepped into it are so gratified with being able to then restart and rekindle some of those relationships. We also talk, if it's appropriate, about that whole short timers syndrome. So often when people say, I'm going to be retiring in 2 months or in 6 months or a year, and they've made it known, people think that they are going to start to phone things in. And sometimes people do. But how powerful and empowering if instead we say, you know what? I want to leave this place as good as I can, leave it better than I could anticipate. Because what a wonderful legacy that people will remember you that way. But it also allows us to then springboard into our next chapter in such a positive and empowered way. So that's another area we talk about, legacy. So there's really a roadmap I take people through, but it's customized. I work with individuals, I work with couples, I do work with groups, but it really is honing in on what feels right to you. How do I see myself in this next chapter? And what's needed to move me in that direction?
It's like planning out your vacation, right? It's like you're planning out the vacation. Where do I
Yeah.
want to go? How do I want to get there? How's it going to make me feel? All
Yeah.
of that, and it's so true. It's like, and when you were talking about it's too late, to call back. One of the things that, as I shared earlier, that Matt had friends show up because that was happening so much. He was born and passed in the same month. Like he was born July 7th. He passed July 22nd. And so the month of July, we call it make the call for Matt. So we say, call that person you haven't spoken to in a while, who you think it's too late to call, and just be like, hey, Wendy, how are you? I haven't talked in a while. You're on my mind, right? Because you don't know, they may be needing to hear a voice. They may needing to hear somebody. And it's so powerful when you can do that, because you never know what that voice on the other end, and they're not going to talk.
Yes.
They might hang up and never call you again, but they're not going to say, well, it's too late to talk to me now, But, and
Well,
it's also
if
too
they
true.
did, if
Right.
they did, I mean,
Yeah. Right.
If
And it's
the
also
worst
about
thing that would
rekindling.
happen,
Yeah.
you call the next person. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so then we're not holding so tightly to things, and that's where the
Yeah.
experimentation comes in, is instead of saying, "When I retire, I'm gonna be doing this, this, this," and holding so tight, it's no wonder that people can become disappointed or become so riveted on that one goal that they miss everything along the way, as we
Yeah.
talk about the journey. And so it's important that we're just, uh, being mindful, mapping things out. I think that people oftentimes feel like, well, mapping it out is that opposite of freedom, is opposite of what retirement. I want to get away from structure. I want to get away from routine. I want to get away from plans. But if we think, like you mentioned, even about a trip, by planning out that trip to whatever level works well for people, there's a freedom in it then because you've got some kind of structure, you've got some kind of roadmap, and then you can really enjoy yourself and step into it fully. But as humans, we're pattern making machines. We need to have some kind of structure. It doesn't mean that we want same old, same old. People can start to feel, and this happens after the honeymoon phase of retirement wears off, that they can start to feel like it's Groundhog's Day, that every day feels the same. And is this all there is for me in retirement? And a lot of people then end up struggling. 1 out of 3 struggle. A lot of people end up kind of phoning it in. The, the studies tell us that people watch on average over 40 hours of TV a week when they retire. So we see them they're replacing with a full-time job of watching TV. It's not healthy. It's not staying connected. It's not staying cognitively fresh. So it's important that we are planful. It doesn't mean that we're confining ourselves. It means that we're liberating ourselves. It means we're giving ourselves those opportunities and that clarity.
And I think that's such a great reminder, and I think that's that's why I want to have you on the show, is to remind everybody that we have to, think about these things. We need to think about, are you replacing your 40-hour-a-week job just to sit in front of the TV? Because that's what life is not about. That's life is about experiences. It's about enjoying life. It's about planning out these things for ourselves so that we don't just sit in a rocking chair the rest of our life. Like, you can enjoy life. There are things you can do, and you get to control it. You get to control how much of the time you want to do and how much you don't want to do. It's funny. My younger son just got married in October, and we were having a conversation when everybody came in for the wedding in October, and he's like, "Yeah, my mom's going to be that one. It's going to call every 5 minutes. Like, can I come see the baby, the grandbaby?" And I looked at him, I go, "Nope. Actually, you think that about me?" I said, "Let me just tell you, I will want to see my grandbabies. Don't get me wrong. However, I'm going to be the one who calls and says, hey, I want to see my at least once a month, spend some time with my grandbaby, of course. But I'm going to be the one that says, I want to help you where I can help you support, because I know childcare is so expensive. However, I'm not going to step, if you don't want me to, I'm going to also enjoy my life. I want to be able to enjoy both. And I might
Yeah.
come and be like, hey, I'm going to go to the park. Can I, grab the bait or whatever that is? But that's not who I'm going to be. I'm enjoying this part of my life. I'm enjoying the coaching part. Like I said, I turned 60 last October. I don't feel 60. I remember the other Saturday night, and it's funny we're talking about this. My car had to go in for the shop on this past Monday, and we got a call Saturday evening. It's like 7 o'clock at night, and this gentleman called, and he was calling to talk to us about our upcoming car appointment. That we was trying to make our car appointment, and that if we make the appointments, that we would get free filters done. And so Chuck was like, "Well, that sounds great, and I already have an appointment." And he's like, "Well, hold on." He put us on hold. And he came back. And he said, "Well, and I'm not kidding you. This is how he talked to my husband. Well, I can't give you the free filters. You already have an appointment." And my husband's like, "Well, I'm confused. You called me and said I could have them. And I already have an appointment. I told you I had an appointment before you put me on hold." And that's exactly how my husband said it. He wasn't rude or nothing. And the man goes, he got so ugly with my husband. He's like, "Have you never made a mistake? I'm 68 years old and people make mistakes and I have to work in my retirement." And I looked at my husband and I said, "Man, I wish I had him about 10 years ago. I wish I had him even 3 years ago. Like, I wish somebody could tell him that there's more to life than what he's doing. Yes, if you have to work, it's great, but find something you love to do, and
Yeah.
like we talk about mindfulness. I thought boy, he's going to be so stressed out. This poor, I felt bad for him, and we're like, wait a minute, your client's at 7 o'clock at night. You don't need to be upset with us. We're just telling you, we're being very honest, but
Mhm.
I'm glad we're having this conversation. And Wendy, I'm glad that, you are helping your clients to map out that trip that they want to take in their life. And how does that look? And, how does the airplane look to get on there, and how they want to create that runway, because it is important, of course, having a good financial retirement is a great thing, but having the mindfulness and having a way to enjoy it and not be stressed, and even if it's just going for a car ride to the beach, like having those moments that you can really enjoy, and give your mind some peace, and enjoy those that you're around, is so important. And I'm looking at the clock, I'm like, oh my god, our time is flown by. This
Well,
is
that's
such
it.
a fun conversation. I
Yeah,
love I love conversations like this.
there's so much more to talk about too, because you're saying that we're short on time, so I won't get into it too much. But you do talk about mental fitness, and I do talk about a pro-aging mindset and a positive outlook and things. And so that gentleman that was on the phone, those saboteurs were really hijacking his happiness
Yep.
and not really being able to see the gifts, being
Yeah.
able connect with people like you who really were in it with him, and so by developing that mental fitness,
Yeah.
we work so hard at developing our external muscles, our physical,
Yeah.
but oftentimes we don't really allow our minds to be as strong and empowering as they could be for us. So
Yeah, so
another
true.
conversation, another
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, definitely. So, Wendy, tell everybody how they can reach you. And if you have anything you want to give to the listeners, if you're driving and you can't take notes, it's okay. We'll put everything in the show notes. So, go ahead and share all that with everybody, Wendy.
I appreciate it. Well, as I mentioned, I do work with individuals, couples, as well as groups. All the information's on my website, and the name of my company is Conflux Retirement Coaching. So that's Conflux. And you can always press on a button there to connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. And I do have that No Regrets Retirement, which is a really fantastic reflection. Would love to offer that to your listeners. And so you can find that at boldnewsteps.com, or just ask for it when you click on my website. So left to hear, what your obstacles or opportunities are, what you're seeing ahead or not seeing ahead. If you're excited or you're anxious or anything in between,
But
I'm more than happy to help.
Wendy will have a great conversation with you as well. So, I want to thank you. Before we let Wendy go, I did tell her we're doing our Better Questions, Better Life cards. So,
Mhm.
Wendy's going to tell me when to stop shuffling, and we're going to have her answer the card that we pulled. So, here we go, Wendy. Tell me when to stop shuffling.
Stop.
All right. So your card says, how do I care for myself? How do you care for yourself?
That's such a great question. I read a book about self care, and the author, and I'm not going to remember the name, talked about faux care, FAUX. And I thought, yeah, that's such an important differentiator, because sometimes I believe that we can even feel a shame around self care, like feel like I know I'm supposed to do things for myself, but I don't know what I need. And so for me, I really try to key in on, well, what is it that I need? And sometimes I just need a little break. I just need to step away from the office, step away from the work, and maybe read a book a little bit. Or I love going on walks every day. I'm really fortunate to be close to the ocean, and I get to walk next to the ocean, which I think is just incredible. And so those are ways that I take care of myself. But I think mostly it's just noticing if I have a difficult emotion coming up, is not trying to push it aside or push it down, but just give myself that calmness, that little brain breather, to then see, well, what's happening here for me?
I love that. That's a great check-in with yourself. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. We'll have to remember that faux care. I love that as well. And I picked up a new book. I got two new books I'm gonna be reading. So I'm excited about picking up those books here soon myself. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
And
it's a
those
pleasure.
Yeah, and those that are listening, again, we'll put everything in the show notes. But I want to remind everybody that you do come in this world. We are a rough oyster on the outside. We've got a lot of work to get into our soulful self-care, to start opening up that show, becoming your integral to greatness. And I hope today you go off and you start planning that retirement and how it's going to look for you and your mindfulness. And if you need any help, reach out to Wendy. And also remember that if you want to, you can always follow us, like, and share below, and check us out at wsliving.com. I hope you have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl. I love when we have conversations about mindfulness and self-care. I love all the conversations I have actually, but today was so much fun because when we talk about retirement, a lot of times we think about the financial aspects. We don't think about the mindfulness part and how we prepare our mind for that. Oftentimes we think about how much money will I have in the bank for retirement. But like Wendy said today, what if you could change the thought about what am I going to do to fill my cup in my retirement? What does it look like for my mental fitness and my self-care? Because like she said, the example, maybe you want to go volunteer, but how much time do you want to volunteer that's going to take you away from other things you want to do? Like really creating that roadmap for retirement and for mindfulness and things you want to do in retirement. And some of you may be listening and saying, well, I'm not going to have a lot of money for retirement. You might have to rely on certain aspects that we have available to us, like Social Security and stuff. So your income may be limited, but doesn't mean that you can't do things for your mindfulness for retirement. There are so many things you can do that don't require a large investment either. And I want you to think about that. I want you to think about maybe you could take a drive to a park. Maybe you could take a road trip somewhere. I live in Florida, and one of our local news stations, they always call it the full tank of gas road trip. Like, where could you go for a full tank of gas? So if that's something, as you're listening to us today and you're listening to the episode and you're wondering, like, what does mindfulness retirement looks like? I would love to help you create that roadmap and help you find out what that can look like for you. So all you have to do is like and subscribe below, reach out to me if you want to that way, or you can go ahead and book a free phone call with me and let's create your roadmap. Let's talk about what that roadmap looks like for you, because I know that you are an amazing shiro and it's time you start thinking about you first, even today and even in the future for retirement. So if you're ready to become stronger, happier, empowered, and that radiant self, book a call today with me. And in the meantime, come back and listen to another episode. Have a great day.